it's time to continue our coverage of classic Gothenburg melodic death metal bands by ranking the albums of Arch Enemy. And as always, we're going to start from the very beginning with Black Earth in 1996. Riffs are pretty decent here right from the start, if kind of a carbon copy of what In Flames were doing, mixed in with some maybe bluesy parts, but unfortunately, the downside here is that the vocals are bad. Like, I know some people enjoy them, but to me, this just sounds like goofy caveman shit. Like, it's kind of embarrassing, honestly. I wince every time I listen to it. The production also very muddy and kind of terrible, honestly. So, probably my least favorite of all of these Gothenburg bands in terms of their debut. Easily the worst for me. I'd much rather go with something from, like, Soilwork. So that said, we're going to start on a low note with a D tier. Hopefully that doesn't scare you away, because believe me, it gets better. They follow that up with Stigmata in 1998, and I'd say the vocals are still not quite there yet. The riffs are still very good, but then again, so are the riffs on all of the other, second release albums. Like, especially by their second album, most of these bands were really launching right into some of their best material with, like, the Jester Race and the Gallery. Not so much with this one. There are some solid moments on the kit, too, like with the title track, which is probably the best track overall since it's instrumental. The piano and epic guitar harmonies on Vox Stellarum are nice as well. So yeah, overall, another D tier, but luckily things start to make a turn for the better after this one. And as always, like with all of my tier lists, this is just my subjective opinion. This is not meant to be like an objective ranking that everyone should follow. So that brings us to Burning Bridges in 1999, and this is a vast improvement on their sound. The Immortal is a great opening. Dead Inside has a little Megadeth going on, complete with the ripping solos. The guitar work in general finally gets to really shine here with tons of great riffs. And while this is still not their best work in terms of the vocals, they continue to get better here, to the point that I can actually enjoy the album and have a good time with it. This is definitely the best work that Johan did with his time as the frontman of this band, and it was his last album with them, with the wonderful Angela Gossow taking over next. I'm going to put this one at B tier. Which brings us to Wages of Sin in 2001, and this marks the beginning again of Angela Gossow's era, which I think is the band's best era. She's just a much stronger vocal presence than Johan ever was. This was also my introduction to the band, and Enemy Within continues to be my favorite Arch Enemy song to this day. What an incredible build-up with the piano into the pounding drums, and then that 10 out of 10 riff. Whenever there's a discussion of best album openers, this is always the first song that comes to mind for me. And fortunately, there are also plenty of other great tracks here too, like Burning Angel with those dueling leads. The thrashy riffing on Ravenous sounds incredible, especially with them shifting to the C tuning for this album. Love those big epic guitar harmonies. Savage Messiah shows some dynamics with that ominous bluesy riff slowly building into the hypnotic head bobbing of the chuggy part. The First Deadly Sin is yet another standout, contrasting the insane speed of the verses with the slow groove of the chorus, and Angela sounding absolutely demonic on this one. This is the top fan-rated album on Metal Storm, and easily my personal favorite within the discography as well. There's no question, it has to be at S tier. And then they followed that up with Anthems of Rebellion in 2003. Another album I listened to a lot in high school, side by side with Wages of Sin. Silent Walls making for another killer opener, if not quite as epic as Enemy Within. Angela sounds absolutely feral here, and it's a ton of fun to scream along with No More, No More. We Will Rise is another instant classic with awesome dynamics, great use of synth, and that riff transitioning in the chorus makes it even more hype. Dead Eyes See No Future has a cool, more melodic edge to the guitars, and then that surprise string section later on is a cool touch. End of the Line absolutely rips. The Meshuggah drumming on Dehumanization rules. It does have some corny moments though, like that one melody on the I Can Feel Nothing part of Instinct that reminds me of Don't Stop Believing. And I could do without the whispering intro on Exist to Exit, but really those are just nitpicks on another banger start to finish album that still holds up. Like going back and re-listening to it now, I maybe even enjoy it more than I did then. So another one going to S tier. And then next up is Doomsday Machine in 2005. So a little bit of a slower start for me. I know some people rave about this album, but I wasn't as engaged as with the previous two. But again, I'm biased since I've listened to those and Burning Bridges a lot more. Still, it's a really solid album with lots of great stuff. Nemesis has some rager thrash riffs, My Apocalypse has some fun Opethy start-stop riffs, and then delves into doomier melodic sections. I Am Legend, Out for Blood has a great changeover in the middle and a super shredding solo. Again, pretty consistent, just maybe not quite at the same level as those previous two, so I'm putting this one at A tier. Then we had Rise of the Tyrant in 2007. Blood on Your Hands is a solid opener, mixing more bluesy grooves with the melodeath riffs and another of several epic solos. I gotta say though, Angela feels like she's holding back a bit more, and that might be in part to returning to a single vocal track, which was a decision she made with this album. The songs are quite good, but it just feels like the special spice is kind of missing to make me truly connect with some of these songs. And there's also not necessarily those tracks that really linger with me. Like on the surface, I recognize that In This Shallow Grave is a veritable gauntlet of great performances, but it just doesn't make me feel anything. I find myself zoning out at times and nothing really sticks, even if I find myself banging my head to the guitar work, and I do dig the little surprise moments like the chanting in the intro of The Great Darkness. Still credit where it's due for everything that it gets right, and all of the great neoclassical influences. I just think a little extra dash of sauce could turn this from good into great. As it stands, I'm also putting this one at B tier. So then we had Khaos Legions in 2011. So Angela wrote all the lyrics for the first time on this album, which would end up being her last time fronting the band. Nice to hear some of that vocal layering again on Yesterday Is Dead and Gone, and I know they were going for more of a pure live approach with the last one, but I definitely just prefer this approach on the recordings. Angela sounding a lot more pissed too. Digging the alternations of palm-muted chugs and earworm picking on Bloodstained Cross, although the melodic section dips into that more corny territory. Under Black Flags We March has that great bass rumble in the intro, building into that driving riff and pounding drums that very much fit the title. Through the Eyes of the Raven and the thrashy Cult of Chaos are also solid. Overall though, I'd say the songwriting just doesn't feel as strong, and it's definitely bloated at 54 minutes. I'm putting this one at C tier. Then there's War Eternal in 2014. Digging the symphonic intro on this one to herald Elisa stepping in on vocals. I tend to prefer Angela's screams overall, but Elisa does a good job mostly picking up right where she left off with the equal parts aggressive and triumphant Never Forgive, Never Forget. The title track is another solid entry into their more melodic side with a super catchy chorus. No More Regrets has some incredible tapping parts and great soloing. Time Is Back and On are brimming with fun riffage, and Down to Nothing gets downright brutal at times. It's not without its lower moments though, namely I find You Will Know My Name to be incredibly cheesy with pretty terrible lyrics. That aside, this still had some of their highest charts in the US and Germany to date, and it's pretty darn good. I'm gonna put it at B tier. Then we got Will to Power in 2017. Arch Enemy proving that they still have a few rippers up their sleeve at this point, starting on a high note with the 1-2 punch of The Race and Blood in the Water. The guitar hooks on both of these tracks seem to reach back to Wages of Sin and even Burning Bridges. Elisa's harsh vocals carry some real power, and even the clean vocals on Reason to Believe makes for a unique touch, even if it feels a little out of place in this track listing. I also absolutely love the surprise orchestral elements on A Fight I Must Win for a truly epic finale. On the flip side, there's also a lot of filler in the middle of this album. Even the second single, The Eagle Flies alone, fails to make a lasting impression with me. At 51 minutes, I feel like they could have excised a few of these and made it a leaner and ultimately stronger 35 or 40 minutes. Overall, not bad, but not great either. Definitely feels like the definition of a C-tier album to me. And that all brings us to Deceivers in 2022, and Handshake with Hell is an incredible opener and, in my opinion, the best possible direction for the Elisa era. She'll never be Angela, so I say just embrace the power of those cleans and the potential to take the band into a whole new melodeath meets power metal era. But if that's not really your bag, Deceiver is more in line with their classic thrash-inspired melodeath sound with guitars and riffs that go as hard and as fast as ever. In the Eyes of the Storm was the first single I didn't really love, but after those two high-energy ragers, it makes sense within the track listing to take things down a bit for something slower and more melodic. I've heard this one compared to Eye of the Tiger, and I can definitely hear some of that in its DNA. Then The Watcher picks things up again, mixing more skanky thrash verses with a slightly folky sounding swing to the choruses. Tons of great soaring harmonized leads on this one. Then Poisoned Arrow brings things down again for another what I've begun to call their screamy ballads. So interesting to me that this one seems ripe for clean singing, but they just refuse to go there for some reason. Sunset Over the Empire is another very classic sounding track that again sounds like it could have been on Wages of Sin, honestly. Sick bass rumble, super chuggy, but also with a nice little melodic hook that worms its way into your brain. And I love that bridge with the massive pounding of the drums. House of Mirrors opens with another throwback 80s heavy metal scream alongside some very era-appropriate riffs. Again, please just lean into this because it sounds great and it helps the album stand out in a time where melodeath as a whole has kind of just petered out as a genre. Then back to slower, more melodic fare with Spreading Black Wings, and this one's a pretty solid head bobber that I'd actually pick over In the Eyes of the Storm. The backing gang chanting is a nice touch, and it also leads nicely into the Morning Star guitar interlude. One Last Stand starts off on a strong note, but then falls back into the same thing I complained about with that I Can Feel Nothing chorus, in that the vocals and corny guitar riff kind of clash. Again, I could do without the whisper vocals too. And then we close with Exiled from Earth, which feels a little uneventful for a conclusion with its slow burn chugs. Not a bad track at all, but honestly, I think we could have ended stronger on Morning Star or even House of Mirrors. All said and done, Deceivers isn't perfect, but if you ask me, it's easily the best album of the Elisa era, and I think it's their best overall since Doomsday Machine. If this were a standalone review, I'd probably give it like a B+, but as far as this ranking goes, I feel good about putting it at A tier within their own discography. Y'all check out this playlist for plenty more melodic death metal tier lists, and let me know down in the comments, what did you think? How would you rank these differently? Let's have a conversation. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.